Which is harder, going from $0 to $1 million or going from $1 million to $5 million? If you ask the average person, they will usually say the jump to 5 million is harder. The math seems obvious. 5 million is 5 times more money. Growing your wealth by $4 additional million sounds like a massive mountain to climb. It feels like it would take 4 times the effort and 4 times the time compared to scraping together that first million. But the data says otherwise. Here is the reality that almost nobody understands until they actually live through it. Going from 0 to 1 million requires you to earn your first million. You have to do the work, live below your means, and actively push the boulder uphill. Going from 1 million to 5 million usually just requires letting your money earn the next 4 million. The math says the first million is almost always harder. Let's break down exactly why that is, what the historical data tells us about real timelines, and why getting to that first million completely changes the rules of the game. To understand why the first million feels practically impossible, you have to look at the mechanics of a small portfolio. When you are starting from zero, your portfolio is tiny. Because it is tiny, the market's returns do almost nothing for you. Every single dollar in your net worth has to come directly from your own labor. Think about the realities of life during this phase. You are not just investing in a vacuum. You are trying to build a portfolio while the rest of the economy is actively extracting money from you. You have student loans charging 6 or 7% interest. You have a mortgage or rent eating up a third of your take-home pay. You are raising kids. Daycare costs more than college tuition in some states. And on top of all of it, you are fighting lifestyle inflation, the temptation to buy a nicer car, or upgrade your apartment as your salary slowly increases. Let's look at the actual math of an ordinary investor. Let's say you are doing the right things. You are budgeting aggressively and managing to invest $20,000 a year. That is roughly $1,666 a month going into the market. You invested in a low-cost S&P 500 index fund. Historically, the S&P 500 has returned about 10% annually before inflation, or roughly 7% after inflation. We will use the conservative 7% real return for these calculations. In year one, you put in $20,000. Your return for the entire year is only around $650. The money hasn't had time to compound yet. Think about that. You hustled for 12 months. You packed your lunch. You skipped the expensive vacations. And the market rewarded you with about $650. That is barely a single month of groceries for a family. Fast forward to year 5. You have been incredibly consistent. Your portfolio has grown to around $115,000. That year, your gains are roughly $6,200. It is starting to move, but $6,200 is still less than what you are actively contributing from your paycheck. By year 10, you have built a portfolio of about $276,000. This is where it gets interesting. This year, your investments finally earn about $16,800. But look at what it took to get here. It took a decade of consistency, 10 years of showing up, 10 years of ignoring the financial media screaming about crashes, 10 years of resisting the urge to spend that money. The market isn't doing much heavy lifting yet. At this stage, your savings rate matters far more than your investment returns. You are essentially pushing a giant boulder up a hill. Every step forward is powered entirely by your own sweat. So how long does it actually take to reach the $1 million mark using real historical market returns? If you invest $20,000 a year at a 7% inflation-adjusted return, it takes roughly 22 years to reach $1 million. A bit over 2 decades of continuous effort. That is the statistical reality. Now, if you manage to increase your income and push your investments to $30,000 a year, you cut that time down to about 18 years. If you are extremely aggressive, maybe you and your spouse are maxing out your 401ks and your IRAs, and you are investing $40,000 a year. You hit the $1 million mark in about 15 to 16 years. Notice the curve. The timeline shortens, but the first million is always a marathon of consistency. It never happens overnight unless you get lucky with a lottery ticket or a single stock bet. And relying on luck is not a financial strategy. It is a gambling addiction. The reason the first million is so difficult is because human psychology is not built for delayed gratification. We are wired to seek immediate rewards. The first 10 years of investing feel incredibly slow. You log into your brokerage account, and the numbers barely move. You see people on social media driving cars they bought with debt. And you feel like you are falling behind because you are driving a 10-year-old Toyota while your money sits in an index fund. But the graph is lying to you visually. The growth is happening. It is just happening on the back end of the curve. And this brings us to the magic point nobody talks about. Let's say you finally made it. You push the boulder to the top of the hill. Your portfolio hits $1 million. Here is where the rules of the game completely change. At a 7% real return, your $1 million portfolio is now earning $70,000 a year. If the market has a slightly better year and returns 8%, your portfolio earns $80,000. Compare that to the average American worker. According to data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the median full-time wage in the United States is roughly around $58,000 to $60,000 a year. After taxes, that take-home pay is even less. This means your investments are now contributing more to your net worth than the vast majority of Americans can save from working a full-time job. Your money is now doing the work of a full-time employee, an employee that never takes a vacation, never calls in sick, and never asks for a raise. This is the turning point. Let's look at the visual comparison. On the left side, you have your salary. You are still saving aggressively, contributing $20,000 a year from your income. On the right side, you have your portfolio. It is sitting there passively, and it just generated $70,000 in market growth. The portfolio wins. The snowball is now rolling downhill on its own. You don't have to push it. Now let's look at the journey from $1 million to $5 million. This is where the math becomes almost unbelievable. Let's use a conservative scenario. You reach $1 million. You decide you are tired of sacrificing. You stop contributing new money entirely. You just leave the $1 million invested in the S&P 500. You walk away. At a 7% real return, what happens? In 10 years, that $1 million nearly doubles to $1.97 million. In 20 years, it nearly quadruples to $3.87 million. By year 24, without investing a single additional dollar out of your own pocket, your portfolio hits approximately $5 million. Read that again. Without investing another dollar, the market created $4 million. The amount of money it took you about 22 years of grueling labor, budgeting, and sacrifice to accumulate was created by the market in roughly the same amount of time, about 24 years, entirely passively. Now, what happens if you don't stop contributing? What if you reach $1 million and you keep adding that $20,000 a year? You hit $5 million in about 21 years instead of about 24. A few years faster, even though your own contributions are now a small fraction of what's driving the growth. The snowball effect still accelerates things. You are adding fuel to an already raging fire. It's just that the fire is now so large your own fuel barely moves the needle. This is the power of compound growth. Albert Einstein supposedly called compound interest the eighth wonder of the world. Whether he actually said it or not doesn't matter. The math proves the concept. Yet, most people never reach this stage. They never see the $5 million. They never even see the $1 million. Why? Because the biggest threat to compounding isn't a market crash. It isn't inflation. It isn't a recession. The biggest threat to compounding is investor behavior. Dalbar, a financial research firm, releases a study every year called the Quantitative Analysis of Investor Behavior. They compare the returns of the overall market to the returns that average investors actually achieve in their accounts. The results are consistently depressing. Over a 20-year period, the S&P 500 historically returns somewhere around 9 to 10% annually. But the average equity fund investor only sees returns of about 5 to 6%. They miss out on nearly half of the market's growth. How does this happen? The math is simple. Buy low, sell high. But human psychology does the exact opposite. People panic sell. The market drops 20% during a crisis. The news is screaming about the end of the economy. Investors get terrified, log into their accounts, and sell their investments at the exact bottom. They lock in their losses. Then, when the market recovers and hits new all-time highs, they feel safe again. They buy back in. They buy high and sell low over and over again. Other people try to time the market. They think they can predict the top and the bottom. They pull their money out waiting for a crash that doesn't come, missing out on massive gains. When the crash finally arrives, they are too scared to buy. Then there are the stock pickers. Instead of buying the entire market through an index fund, they try to find the needle in the haystack. They chase hot tech stocks based on social media tips. They buy crypto at the peak. They take on massive risk trying to skip the boring 22-year timeline. Instead of getting rich quick, they wipe out their capital and have to start over from zero. And of course, there is lifestyle inflation. People start making $150,000 a year. Suddenly, the Honda Civic isn't good enough. They lease a BMW. They move into a luxury apartment. Their expenses rise to meet their income, and their savings rate plummets to zero. All of these behaviors destroy compounding. The market wants to make you wealthy. The historical data proves it wants to make you wealthy. But you have to stay seated. The only way to get the 7 or 8% average return is to live through the 30% drops and the flat decades without pressing the sell button. This brings us to the big lesson. The journey to your first million teaches you discipline. It teaches you how to budget. It teaches you how to live on less than you make. It forces you to develop patience and consistency. You learn how to ignore the noise. But the journey to your next millions teaches you a completely different skill. It teaches you how to stay out of your own way. Once you hit that first million, the heavy lifting is done. The boulder is at the top of the hill. The only thing that can stop it from rolling down to 5 million is if you get in front of it and try to push it sideways. Building wealth starts with effort. It starts with your ability to earn, save, and delay gratification. But keeping wealth growing requires something else entirely. It requires the emotional control to sit on your hands. It requires the confidence to do nothing when the world is panicking. The first million is an active battle. The second million is a passive observation. Let me ask you a question to put all of this into perspective. Would you rather have $100,000 in cash handed to you today, no strings attached? Or would you rather have the habits and the mindset required to build $1 million portfolio? Most people take the cash. They see the immediate number. They see the new car or the down payment. But the cash will be spent. Without the habits, it always is. Look at lottery winners. A study by the National Bureau of Economic Research found that nearly 70% of people who suddenly receive large sums of money end up broke within a few years. The person who chooses the habits chooses the better deal. Because once you understand how the first million works, the next million stop being a life problem. They become a math problem. You know that you need to save a certain amount. You know you need to invest it in broad index funds. You know you need to wait 15 to 20 years. You know the market will crash during that time, and you know you will not sell. The equation is solved. The variables are known. The only requirement is time. The first million is the hardest money you will ever earn, but it buys you the freedom to let the rest of the money earn itself. If you are watching this right now, where are you on this journey? Drop a comment below. Are you working toward your first $100,000, your first $500,000? Have you crossed the $1 million mark and are now watching the snowball roll, or are you somewhere in between? Let me know in the comments. Read other people's milestones and realize you are not alone in this marathon. Keep pushing the boulder. The top of the hill is closer than you think.